Welcome to the FE Collective Reflective. Thanks everyone for joining us today. Um, Today is really to be a big reflection on not just the event, but the outcome of the event of the FE Collective. So if you wasn't there, you missed out. FE Collective was a combination, collective intelligence from like 100 different experts within FE and skills, but also those without. So looking at the impact of artificial intelligence, investing in the sector of the future, and also looking what progression, progression could be. Literally on Tuesday, we've launched the report, which you can also check out here with this QR code if you haven't picked up on the report already. It's 35 pages, it's long, it's 100 people's different views and opinions, but we've got key takeaways from each of the sections for people to look at. It's really interesting. We looked at the impact of AI, and that could be everything from safeguarding to data to trust, and developing trust with the sector and stakeholders, with employers, also development and what we need to do, but also around brand FE, looking at modular systems, looking at careers, looking at the system of the future. So I've got four really cool guests. I've got David from NCFE, Victoria from Education and Training Foundation. Hey, David, how are you?
Morning,
Victoria,
Gavin.
wonder if you could come into the studio as well.
Hi,
And
hello.
how are you? We've also got Jill and Chris, which we're going to bring in a little bit as well. But I was wondering, like, if we could maybe unpack a few things, David and Victoria, where we could particularly think around some of the findings from because this is the voice of the collective that we're sort of talking about, which is like kind of interesting around what is the future of the sector. And this sort of a dual thing that's been coming up quite a lot, and it's been coming from outside of the collective as well, is around developing trust, but also looking at flexibilities and modularization. So, David, I wonder if we could just kick it all off with yourself around how do we develop trust with government, trust with employers, trust with learners, trust with each other, within the sector, and why is it important?
Yeah, I'll start with the second half of that question, if that's all right, Gavin. So,
Yeah.
it's an opinion at the moment, but it's been validated through probably thousands of conversations over recent years. That if you were to survey lots of people working in the sector, from teachers to trainers through to college principals, chief execs, and MDs, and said, how much trust do you feel there is in the system? Do you think we're high trust, or do you think we're low trust? I think it's fairly evident that the vast majority of people would say that the system operates on low levels of trust. And I'll explain what I mean by that in a moment. And as a leader of an organisation, and I think every leader would agree, is that if an organisation operates on low levels of trust, well, it can really hamper levels of engagement, it can hamper levels of productivity, it can stifle creativity, it can stifle innovation. So if we run a whole system on low levels of trust, it's really hard in any one organisation or institution to then have high levels of trust. And I think more than ever, with the pace of change in the world, we need high levels of engagement from our people. We need high levels of productivity. We need creativity. We need innovation. But in a low trust environment, that's really, really difficult. So I think there's a really deep fundamental problem in the system about that sort of low trust paradigm that we operate within. So what I mean by low levels of trust is that over recent years, the system has become more centrally controlled by Department for Education, the Institute, Ofqual, for example, Ofsted. There's a lot of spotlight on Ofsted at the moment. I mean, even low trust and fear to some extent as well. And fear is not conducive to high levels of productivity and performance. Compliance regimes are very complex, they're very bureaucratic, they're very time consuming, and they're very costly. And so it's not a direct criticism of any one of those stakeholders, because everybody that I meet, whether it's from the department or the institute, the individuals are good people doing a good job for the right reasons. But we've created this centrally controlled, very compliance focused and very bureaucratic system, which I think just stifles that creativity and innovation that we need. So when you think about it from a culture perspective, trust is absolutely crucial. In any relationship, in any organisation, in any situation, high levels of trust are needed for us to be able to test and trial and move things forward. But our system at the moment is not in that place. And it's a really hard place to get to because we're using, taxpayers' money. This is public funds, and so it's got to be used well. We've got to make sure, as taxpayers, I'm sure we would all want to make sure, every pound that goes into the system, there's value there and it's making a positive difference. But for me, it's about figuring out, how we can develop high levels of trust, particularly in our teachers and our trainers, to free them up a little bit to be a bit more creative, but within the institutions that operate in the system. And from an awarding organisation perspective, this sort of low trust paradigm, it's my view that it's slowed us down in terms of designing and developing qualifications that are agile and responsive and fit for what learners need to make them highly valuable in a rapidly changing labour market. So I would say it's a cultural thing, and therefore, shifting culture is one of the hardest things to do in any organisation, never mind at a systems level. But I think it's one of the really profound things that we need to look at to say, well, what are all of the ways in which we can improve levels of trust? And maybe it does talk to professionalisation that we come on to later. Maybe it does talk to, we're very complex with lots of actors playing different roles in the system, and could we consolidate that a little bit to make it less complex? So yeah, for me, it's such an important subject. And the minute you think about, if I ran my organisation on low trust, what would that do? It'd be ultimately, and it's a strong word, it'd be toxic for a culture of an organisation. Yet at the systems level, that's where I think we are. And I think that could easily be validated by, survey everyone works in the sector. How trusted do you feel by the system to do your job, and to innovate and to improve? And I think that the message that would come back would be pretty worrying, actually, that most would say we don't feel trusted.
Yeah, no, definitely. Victoria, anything you want to add around how do we develop trust? Because trust is, we're a sector, like as David highlighted, that we're all people. Do you know what I mean? So like, how do we sort of develop trust and also look at development and looking at a way forward?
Yeah, thanks, David. Really, really interesting thinking about that trust. We're 10 years on from deregulation. So, I think a lot of the work that we do at the Education Training Foundation, we've been supporting the workforce, thinking about professionalism. What does it mean? I think that change that we're making in terms of trust is, what can we do as individuals, as teams, as leaders to really encourage that progression through people's careers? We don't have that. And our sector is so diverse. We can't have something that is imposed upon us to say, well, this is how you progress through your career. But what can we do as the sector? And that's why it was so great that everybody came together for the FE Collective across the sector as well, with a real enthusiasm and sharing innovative ideas for how we can do that. But partly it's about building strong and effective leadership. What is that pathway progression to really get the behaviors, the skills, the knowledge to navigate the complex environment that we're working within? What are the capabilities that we need to support leaders to take their teams forward for this, but also for us as individuals? We have our career pathway through QTLS and ATS, and we've had a number of really motivated people kind of coming through those routes, but we need more. And what does that mean for the rest of the sector, not only for colleges, but for people working in ITPs or adult and community sector? We're much broader than that. And so us as a vibrant and diverse sector, what does professionalisation mean for that? And just coming back to, again, the idea of trust, and you mentioned right at the beginning, Gavin, around brand FE. So, it was lovely, Sally Alexander, who mentioned about in the report, FE needs to take ownership of its own brand. So it's recognising that we've all got ownership of that. We can all help to raise the status of FE, to be really proud of what we're contributing as a sector in terms of supporting our learners, transforming those lives, giving them opportunities. So what does that mean for us all to trust ourselves, to trust our teams, to develop things?
Yeah, no, definitely. Also, I didn't say at the beginning, we're live, so it's now 10:10. And if anyone wants to add any comments, please do. This was a report of 100 different voices, so we did our best to distill that down. If you're like, oh, my burning question didn't come in, please please do add that in, and we'll try to bring that in a bit later. Try to keep it short so it doesn't go over the screen. David, I want to ask you something, which is we've looked at trust, and it keeps coming up in the sector, but you mentioned agile, and we tried to run the event in an agile way. We had sprints. It was a nod to agile. It was like in sprints in the afternoon and trying to sort of break things down and going into working groups. And we've got a reflective, but like I wanted to ask you about being agile and modular, because you as a CEO of an awarding organisation, but also a social impact charity, are dealing all the time with regulators, and like you said, it is government funded money we're dealing with. We're dealing in a government led system, and it's right that things are checked and looked at. You know, we can't go off and sort of just do whatever we want, but you must come across on a daily basis and working with different, like you said, the individuals in regulators. How can we be in a government funded environment, but also have a modular, agile system? What is the solution to better to sort of deliver on that? And how big an ask is it to better ask people to, like government, to trust us more, to give us flexibility and agile?
Yeah. And I mean, I've been in the sector for nearly 20 years now. And I remember 20 years ago, we were talking about a more flexible, a more agile, a more responsive system. And we had a bit of a go at it with QCF, the Qualifications and Credit Framework. And I won't go there because that's a whole, day and probably part of therapy session to talk about that. But if I think about apprenticeships, I think is a really good example. And Gavin, you know, I say this all the time. It still takes us about 2 years to develop a new apprenticeship standard. You know, we do it in a very analog way. So it's 12 people round a table once a month, once every other month, coming up with what does that standard need to look like. So it takes a long time to develop it. It takes typically at least a year for the market to adopt, and then a minimum of a year plus a day for the very first apprentice to pop out the other end, you know, knowledgeable, skilled, competent, and hopefully productive in that job role. And how many occupations stay still for 4 years? I'm not sure there are any more that stay still over that period. So we all recognise, I think, that it takes too long. However, the introduction of standards, I think, has been, the Institute have done a really good job, actually, in my humble opinion, in terms of establishing those standards and setting a baseline for what is required for this particular occupation. So I certainly wouldn't want to throw that out. But one of the suggestions we would put forward is, okay, so if an apprenticeship programme, the whole programme is 100%, for argument's sake, could the standard talk to maybe 80 to 90% of what will be taught and learned on that programme and assessed? And maybe the 10 or 20%, there's a bit more flexibility to rapidly design and develop whatever that individual might need for them to be really valuable and really productive, and to adopt maybe a new technology, or to be multi-skilled, or to meet their particular employer's needs, or maybe to meet their long-term career goals, not just the job that the apprenticeship talks to. So we're not suggesting, you know, make everything really flexible and really agile, because from a systems perspective and from a delivery perspective, I think it would be chaos. So what's the balance? You know, can we say the core of a program is relatively fixed over a longer term, but there's flexibility and agility and responsiveness around the edges? And could organisations, and I would say this, of course, but could an awarding organisation that is regulated, that is, you know, going to uphold quality standards, but theoretically could develop modules much, much quicker and deploy them to market much quicker and train teachers and trainers much, much quicker, could that be bolted on in a flexible way, and there's funding there to support it? I mean, it's not, you know, it'll be most of our memories that most qualifications used to have mandatory units and optional units. So it's not unfamiliar territory for us to say the mandatory stuff is obviously fixed and the optional stuff can be plugged in, unplugged, and something new plugged in. The very simple and really obvious example is every single person going through an apprenticeship right now could probably do with a module about how AI may impact on their role in future, and they may need to develop knowledge, and they may need to develop skills to be able to use AI effectively within their job role. But how does that happen at the moment? It either doesn't happen at all, or it happens outside of the system of sort of recognition for that particular program of teaching and learning. So my appeal, if you like, to the system would be, just give us a bit of flexible space to play around the edges, because we think lots of what we've done is really positive, but we couldn't say that it's agile and responsive. So just that little space to have that agility and responsiveness could really take us forward.
Yeah, no, definitely. And people are starting to comment as well. It's literally, as soon as you said about reflecting back, actually, David, someone said, Like this conversation seems to be eternal. LinkedIn user, next time you can say your name would be good. But like I agree. But I think what we've done here, which is a little bit different, is we've got, instead of being talked to, is the sector trying to talk out and do a collection of people to say what they need. Vicky said a really interesting point as well around brands, saying that AOC, and they have done a really good job of raising the profile of colleges, and I 100% agree. And I also really agree with this, is the whole colleges aren't just FE. The FE sector is colleges, independent training providers, employer providers, awarded organisations, learners, parents. It's everything. It's a bit like we're covering everything within the FE sector. I think coming together and thinking about brand is kind of important. So I would 100% agree. Vicky, can I ask you a really quick point around, if we're looking at professionalisation and development, it's a really interesting point that David rose around. We were just before with the FE Collective, it was 2.5 weeks for the AI Safety Summit, and within that, we were talking about the speed of change. So with AI, we're going to be seeing increases of like where we've seen previously at 10 years in 1 year, then again another, and then it's going to just compound and just keep moving faster and faster and faster, which is exciting but kind of scary. And what does that mean for developing quals? But what does that mean around uptake? How can we make sure that we're equipping people to be able to do this? So how can we encourage people to be continuously developing themselves? We're not builders with the sink hanging off the wall or a hole in the floor. How can we as a sector be developing ourselves? How do we do that with each other?
Yeah, absolutely. And I was reflecting on another event that I went to where somebody was presenting about this, and he had his iPhone and he dropped it onto the table in front of him and said, "This is an abacus. In terms of what we're looking at for the future, we are looking at a huge, vast change ahead." So yeah, AI is the start of it, and yeah, every sector needs to think about what this means. But I think it's also that let's not forget about the emotional intelligence that comes as part of that. Reports of the humanity's demise have been grossly overrepresented. So it is thinking about, what those behaviors, what those more flexible, analytical, critical skills that we need to be able to connect as humans with each other, because that's not going away. So I think, David's right. We need to think flexibly about how the system can find ways of moving more quickly and responding to change, and how our accreditation, how our qualifications landscape, how our training and the workforce support that we bring really looks to future-proof what our learners and students are going to be grappling with. But let's not forget that we are still looking at those broad human skills, capabilities, behaviours that will support us and to enable a thriving and sustainable FE system.
And Vicky, do you mind if I come in on that, Gavin? I couldn't agree more that we've become really obsessed with technical skills. And of course, as the world changes so rapidly, improving our technical skills is really important. We've got a missing middle of level 4 and 5 technical skills, and that's a problem in terms of productivity in this country. So absolutely, technical skills, it is critical that we raise our game on technical skills. But if we don't teach our teachers and our trainers to be able to help young people or adult learners to become more resilient, more adaptable, solve problems, be critically thinking, apply, really effective judgment and decision making, we're not equipping those people to respond to an ever-changing world. So it's that fusion between raising our game on technical skills, but really recognizing that without the essential skills, we're not going to equip people. We'll equip people for a job. We won't equip people for a career and a life. So it's those two things together that are absolutely crucial that we've got to get right.
Yeah, 100%. Well, I want to say thank you. So do you want to stay on, or do you want me to do a dedicated time with Jill and Chris? It's up to you. I think it could be.
Let Jill and Chris have their turn. Yeah. I've spoken too much already.
Yeah. David, Victoria, thank you so much for joining us today. I just, honestly, this was a joint thing with NCFE, and David, your team were amazing in just giving us free rein with that. I'd like just to give full nod to Kim and Lindsay and Victoria. Ania really helped us with the report, and yourself as well. So thank you both so much for your support with the FE Collective.
You're very welcome. We'll stay connected and enjoy the
yeah,
chat.
no, definitely. So just before I bring in Jill and Chris, it's competition time. So everyone has probably seen who went to the FE Collective that you can actually have a FE Collective t-shirt. But if any of you would like to get an FE Collective exclusive t-shirt, please check out the Legacy article at the end of the show on FE News to better see how to win that. So Jill, Chris, I wonder if you could join us in the studio today. Hey Jill, hey Chris.
Good morning.
Hiya, how you doing?
Yeah, really good. And just for context, anyone wasn't at the FE Collective, Jill was in the morning, was a scene setter, so I was like working on working with different people around investing in the sector of the future. Remember rightly, Jill? And like that was a good collection of people, because it wasn't just one like independent training provider, which HIT never is, but like we had like a college training provider, but also run by an investment banker. Was the chairing of it to be able to get a different perspective on how to be investment ready. Chris was one of our moderators for looking at around progression and sort of policy and looking at the future. I wonder if I could ask you both a question, because time's really, really flying. Trust. Jill, how do we build trust within the sector, to each other, but to government, but also to learners, to employers, to parents? How do we build trust?
Oh wow, yeah. I mean, how long have you got, Gavin? We haven't got long enough to answer that question. Yeah, David and Victoria already spoke really eloquently about the building of trust and everything. I think we need a big shake-up here. One of the things that came out of our working group at the collective was that things, every time we get a new minister, every time we we are constantly being bombarded with change. It's steady state doesn't exist, and the nature of our government in the UK, and by the way, I don't expect you to be able to change that for us, Gav, but good luck with it, is that there's no real incentive for anybody to make a very, very long-term investment, because we don't have very, very long-term planning. 5 years and that's your lot if you're lucky, and in the midst of all that, there'll be lots of changes as well. So I think one of our big asks, which would help to build trust, would be to have some form of outside of government cross-party agreement around what do we need our skill system to look like. And I think the way that we'll get to that is by, and this will come as no surprise to you, I'm a chartered accountant by profession, one of God's children, and the only way we're ever going to get to that point is by proving the value of financial, economic value of what we do, and the human value, the social value of what we do as a broad sector. Yeah, I mean, you touched on it briefly. This is a broad and deep sector. The joy of being in that room with all sorts of people from that sector was fantastic. The importance, though, of getting the message has not just got to go to ourselves and other educators, because we're great at that, aren't we? What an echo chamber we exist in. What we need to be doing is pushing it out further and really I was at a meeting with Ben, the new CEO at AELP, is just about to start there in a few weeks' time, yesterday, and he was talking. We were talking about how do we get into Treasury and get them to start understanding not just the social value, which is incredibly important, and the value to individuals, but in a broader sense, better ways of measuring how we can, as a sector, we can really, really build the economy. And I think that's what will really have a big impact on how well we're trusted. The measurement systems at the moment, frankly, are really quite brutal and for many people completely irrelevant. I was thinking, I'm in a thought process this morning around QAR and success rates, and if somebody gets promoted so that their apprenticeship is no longer suitable for them, they count as a fail. What's that about? So we need to better understanding, more stability, I think will really help to build trust in the sector.
Yeah, no, definitely. And talking about the report going far and wide and reaching, it has actually, and I think we also need to build trust that we're asked if we're expecting them to come back. I mean, I know that Half and Seema's team are definitely looking at it. Didn't have the right timing with Treasury with the autumn statement yesterday, unfortunately, but they did respond back. So yeah, we must trust that they're looking at it as well, because they said they are. I think we've got to trust them. They are. Chris, I wanted to bring you in, and I had you on purpose for this show, because not only are you a great guy, Chris, and wearing a Spurs top as well, but it's also you've got a lot of special advisor experience. You've helped shape different policies. You still do so now. You can see the other side of the curtain. Really, a lot of people don't have insight to. How do we build trust with the other side of the curtain, with those that are actually implementing policy and looking at this?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we talked elsewhere about the kind of revolving door of ministers and those on a short-term strategy, and that's very much the case, that politicians are for short-termism, and they have to be, and they need to be. Underneath that, you've got the senior civil service, and there's always a lack of risk-taking. There's caution, because it's public money. When things go wrong, it's very public, and there's always a challenge to try and take a risk appetite that's not the most cautious you could possibly be. You hear it in other areas of government as well. Underneath that, you have the more junior civil servants, and then you have the advisory team, who tend to have some sector expertise. They've had touch points with the sector, but it may be some time ago. So again, your up-to-date knowledge and skills fades, and therefore you trust less what you're hearing. You think people are trying to pull the wool over your eyes or play a fast one or something like that, and it feels that it perpetuates. So we end up with a cascade where no element trusts each other internally. Therefore, you're not going to trust the sector. So that's where that kind of starts from. Now, in terms of where policy comes from, the kind of consultations that we have with the sector and the sector with DfE, once it's all digested, there's a massive hierarchy to work through before anything becomes proper policy. We obviously have policy and strategy. Politicians make the policy. And for someone like Rob Halfon, you mentioned, who'll be reading this, his ability to effect anything change, he might look at it and go, these 3 points, let's do them tomorrow. The wheels and machinery that support that, because of the low risk appetite, because of the lack of trust, means it will take time. And it'll probably take time now beyond the next election. And we're right in a period now, I did an article for you a couple of weeks ago, Gav, now where there's no effective policy going to come out of the current government, ignoring the colour of hue of who comes in next, because there's going to be an election at some point. We know that, at least 14 months maximum. That's something that policy can't deal with. And when you've got a civil service that's like that, that's well-meaning, that wants to do the best they possibly can, and David mentioned each individual, they're all lovely people, they're absolutely. But as a hive mind, it's very, very difficult, and it isn't the thick of it. That's not the daily experience, but you can see how that complexity crashes into each other. And if you've got an overall Treasury approach, which is the most cautious it can be, damping everything down, that will stifle the creativity. That stifles the risk. We had 2 big policy shifts in the last 20 or so years, which took a risk. So the introduction of T-levels took a risk. And you can see 50% of it is, oh, it's magnificent, wonderful, the best thing we've ever seen. The other half is, oh, right, we're tinkering with the system. So you've always got the naysayers and the positives. Apprenticeship standards from back in 2010 was taking a risk. And this kind of new approach to apprenticeship, say it's give employers control. We've been saying that ever since I've been doing it for 26 years, is employer-led. What do we really mean by that? And government don't understand that. They don't have the ability to connect directly with the service user on a day-to-day basis. That's probably where it comes from. And I've been there, so I hope I can say that, and any civil servants might hopefully reflect and go, well, that's not my lived experience on a day-to-day basis. No, it isn't. But across the 3 departments that I've worked with in the past, there has been a hands-off disconnect between the chalk face, as it were, in our world, and the policy areas. And the time it takes to bridge it takes us beyond the Parliament, and that's where some of this comes from.
Yeah, no, definitely. We've got 10 seconds left. If that's all right, I'm going to wrap us over another 5 minutes, if that's all right with everyone, because I think there's a question I really want to ask where you both touched on it around employer. So yeah, we talked about government, we talked about what do we need to develop trust, but Jill, in particular, you're in an industry which is rapidly changing, is like is responding all the time to customer needs and changes and the such, and how can we develop a better FE system, for the employer to develop trust, to be modular, to be reactive, to be able to match their needs, because we need to be not just catching up, we need to be ahead to be able to be a really good partner with employers and for learners to give them the skills they need. How do we get there? Do you know what I mean?
To be honest, Gavin, I think we're already there. If you talk to the employers that we work with, they will tell you that we do a fantastic job of delivering the skills, knowledge and behaviour and all of that good stuff that they need and that their people need in order to make their businesses more efficient and to, improve the skill sets of the individuals. So the individuals really benefit too. Absolute social justice being seen to be done. They'll tell you all of that is already happening, what they'd like. There is no need for a wholesale reform. What there is need for is some flexibility around the edges. David touched on it. Oh, it's a really good point. If a lump of that program was allowed to be entirely reflective of what the individual employer needs at that time and perhaps in the future, I can't tell you today, if I start a learner on a program today, in 12 months' time, there is inevitably going to be new tech, new ideas, fashion changes, whatever that might be, that will affect their role. And they need to know about all of that. So I suppose one way I would say is that we're already doing all of this, that apprenticeship standard, but that fits onto two sides of A4, which was very much Matt Hancock's thing, is fine as far as it goes. But clearly it's never going to cover the whole role. So we have got some flexibility around how we do things. I'll give you an example. On our programs, we run some golden threads through. So golden threads around sustainability, eco-conscience, that good stuff. That's a golden thread. Minimal waste, we run that through all of our programs. So it's really, really important. We're already doing it. What would be really helpful, though, is that if the way that we draw down funding could be flexed so that we can match what we actually need to do when we need to do it. Lots and lots and lots of employers would really benefit, and actually individuals would too, from being able to front load some of their programs. Because you start a new member of staff and they're completely green, never done the job before, they're going to have an intensive phase at the beginning because that employer needs them to get up to speed as quickly as possible. This is work-based learning. This is that I'm talking about. Work-based learning needs to be reflective of that work practice. That's kind of what will happen. But at the moment, the way that funding is drawn down is evenly over the period of the programme. That's not how we're doing the delivery, and that's not what the employer wants and what the learner needs. So that's just one small flex. It doesn't need any change in legislation. It just needs a bit of software re-engineering to enable that to happen. It also needs, when we're back to trust again, surprise, but we're back to trust again, it also needs the sector, that those who pay the funding, to trust that the work is being done, that the money is being drawn down for. But I'm not saying we shouldn't do it because we can't work that out. We should be able to work out a system that allows that to happen. And inevitably there will be some system abuse. But what we do is we should go into that and say, what might that abuse look like? How do we minimize our risk? What is our absolute risk here? Because the benefits, I can sit down and do the maths on this, and I can explain to the Treasury the benefits of us being able to do that and how much better value they'll get out. And then, the measurable change in effectiveness of individuals in the workplace would be straightforward to do.
Yeah, no, definitely. We're 34. I've already 75 minutes. We're already there. Chris, if you had a one-liner that you'd want to see as an outcome from the FE Collective, what's your reflective? What would you want to see?
I'd say we'd definitely have some bravery. Allow the sector to do its job. Just back off. Let the sector get on with it. Set overall priorities. Fix the skill system. Fix productivity. Fix the economy. All of that, whatever it might be. Then say, okay, over to you, and then judge on the performance, judge on the result, rather than micromanaging, especially compliance, especially the little bits of money. That's not where the assets should be sweated. It's the big picture. Let FE do its job.
Yeah, no, definitely. Jill, what's your FE Collective reflective? This one liner, we're nearly there.
Do you know what? For me, Gav, it was the absolute joy of being in those rooms with people from across the breadth and depth of the sector. Some people that I knew really well, some people I'd never met before, and that sense of everybody wishing to be genuinely collaborative. there was nobody trying to win anything over on each other. And across the entirety of the sector, there's this assumption that colleges hate independent training providers because they think we're trying to eat their lunch. And, that doesn't help that the minister actually says that at conferences. That doesn't help. And not just the current minister, but previous ones too. Actually, if you look at the granular level, we are working really closely together with all sorts of different parts of the sector, and doing more of that has got to be a good thing.
Yeah, no, definitely. Right. Well, thank you so much, everyone. We will get back to you really soon, and we hope that you enjoyed the show today, and see you next time at the next FE Collective. Well, sorry, Owen, a bit of a technical issue there of me like dropping out when I didn't need to, and I was chatting away, and I was not there. Thank you so much, Jill and Chris.